What's going on? Welcome to the Creator Factor podcast, where we help content creators build businesses, brands, and communities online. I'm the host that loves you the most, Ozeal, and today we're going to be learning, sharing some tips on how to level up your video podcast. Expert insights from someone who is running a successful video podcast in my birth city of Chicago,
Woo.
chicagopodcaststudio.com, and advice for content creators looking to launch, of course, their own video podcast. Creator Factor fam, let's welcome to the show founder of Inova Digital and Chicago Podcast Studio, my man, Tom Brown in the building. What's up, Tom?
Thank you for having me, Ozeal. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to our conversation here. I'm passionate about this stuff, so yeah, ask away. I'm excited about this.
Man, listen, a couple months ago, I'm going to share this story with our viewers and watchers.
Sure.
A couple months ago, I've been podcast coaching for quite some time for the past 8 years. A couple months ago, somebody said, "Hey, listen, we need some video component into the podcast. Can you help us out?" And being an audio guy, I was like, "Man, I don't know much about video." Production as it relates to podcasting. Let me kind of dig into YouTube University and see what I find. So I searched,
Hmm.
went down the rabbit hole, and found some couple videos. And then I stumbled upon this one video, and it was this handsome gentleman who was breaking down the video. The video. It wasn't you, Tom. It was somebody else.
Oh, okay. No, fair enough. Fair enough. I bet he was handsome then.
He was. He was. Um, and I was like, "Yo," and he was just breaking down the way he was just the different equipment and studio. And I was like, "Look, I need to learn from this man." So I reached out, and this is the man, handsome face
Here we
right across
are.
from me, and here we
Hopefully,
are.
still 2 years later. I think just about from when that video went live. Probably
Right, it was 2
close.
years ago. And
Sounds
one of the
about right.
things that I noticed, Tom, is, and of course, I was checking out all your other content that you were doing
Yeah.
with Inova Digital, and obviously you have a
Sure.
background in video production. And I was like,
Yep.
"Wow, this is high quality video production here. He's no joke." And then I saw the video, and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing." So your that particular piece of video, that content that
Yep.
I saw about the video studio setup, it blew everybody out the water. I mean, the production
Thank you.
was amazing, but you were just great at teaching the fundamentals and kind of going step by step on how to create a video podcast setup, man. So I'm curious, man. So your background is video production. What inspired you? Like, what was the aha moment to say, "Okay, I'm gonna go and start doing this video podcasting thing"?
Yeah, well, so as we were talking about just briefly before we started recording here, got my start in the studio business when I was in high school, and I was into DJing. From DJing, I was like, I had a decent amount of equipment, and I was like, what, it'd be great to be able to make money doing something that I enjoyed, and so I was like, I'll just get a microphone and a little studio set up, and we'll start just a little recording studio in my basement here, and did that throughout high school and college, and never took off much. Again, just a basement studio, but I was busy enough, and it was a good side hustle income, and it was fun. There's no better feeling than doing what you love for work, or at least just like at the time, it's like this is better than working at Home Depot or something, or I worked at Office Depot in high school for a brief time. So did that. And then when I graduated college, I either needed to get a full-time job or take this a little bit more seriously because, again, the studio wasn't like killing it. And so I decided to start Inova Digital. And at that time shot pretty wide again, where I was like, I'll do, I had started doing music videos from the recording studios thing. So I liked doing videos. I also somewhat knew how to make websites via Squarespace or Wix and stuff. And then I was like, yeah, we'll do all this sort of stuff. Over time, it trickled down to just video. And then I think probably 3 to 4 years ago from this time, I kind of had the idea of um, setting up a space for video podcasts. And I did research, and there was plenty of recording studios that like offered podcast services. And hey, if you want to pay extra money, we'll set up a camera or a GoPro or something poor quality. And so I didn't see anyone else. So I was like, opportunity there. And then this was also the time that Joe Rogan's podcast was popping off, and I'm sure you can relate too. There was probably a little bit of a podcast crisis, not a crisis, but it was a traditionally audio only
Mhm.
service for a long time, and people only wanted to listen in audio and to watch a podcast. What the hell? And then again, a lot of comedians were starting to develop their own shows that they released the audio, but they had the video component. and I saw the massive spike in shorts and reels and vertical content and just short form bits. And a lot of people were taking podcasts and chopping it up and doing clips that way. And from the video world, we would do that for a lot of businesses. We'd come out, film interviews with people, chop it up, and to have us, me and another person or two, come out to your office, bring all of our cameras, lights, set up, try to make your office look suitable and do all that. Like it's a different ballpark expense wise. And I was like, I bet you if we just kind of build a space that can get utilized for long form content at an like affordable price, I guess, or a cheap price, that it made sense. And so 2 years ago, kind of took the leap to move into the studio. The video company was doing well enough that I felt comfortable enough taking on this lease and having the space and giving this a go, because it was kind of just something that's like in the back of your head, like you should do this, you should do this, and then yeah, and so 2 years later, now we're doing pretty well. It's still an arm of the bigger conglomerate, I guess we'll call it, but it's becoming a more strong arm. And last month was our best month, man. We had pretty good sales, and I think what I really like about this business is it feels like it's more organically growing. I feel like we obviously see more clients than with the other business, and
Wow.
it's been fun. It's been a good experience, and I think podcasting is almost, I'll say almost, but it's good to we enjoy a lot of them. We get to be a
Mhm.
fly on the wall. We get to meet cool people, hear really cool stories, and do stuff like that. So I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, that's more or less how I kind of got into it. I had a video background. I had a little bit of an audio background from the studio business. I saw
Right.
the business opportunity. I saw that nobody else was doing it. And then there was a studio that was cheap enough down the street from my house. And I was like, let's give it a shot. And so, yeah, here we are.
Feel like it was like a perfect convergence between your audio production background, being in that scene
Yeah.
as a DJ, and then your video production,
Yeah.
and then just kind of bridging the gap, and then just seizing the opportunity, right, to serve this video podcast phenomenon, which is growing up. I mean, it's just blowing, man. It's just
Yeah.
crazy to see coming from a lot of OGs were kind of like Tom when this came out and YouTube were like, "Hey, we're gonna play in the sandbox. Like, we're gonna embrace podcasting." And some of
Mhm.
the people that I used to talk to that the audio only OG podcasters, they're like, I don't know, man. How that's not a podcast, that's a video. And they
Yeah.
happen to, there was a lot of backlash from the people that I was around. And I was like, nah, I think
I
this
bet.
is
Yeah.
from a creator. I was like, I think we should embrace video. I think video podcasting and live streaming is not nothing new. I mean, Joe Rogan's been
Mhm.
there for a minute. Live streaming has been there for a while. I remember the first introduction to a video podcast was back in 2009. It was
Mhm.
two guys doing a video podcast remotely, but they were doing a video podcast.
Mhm.
But it's interesting to see that, man, how it's just blowing up. And obviously from a video producer saying like, "Oh, wow, this is the truth. Like, this is really happening." A new market is coming.
To me, it seemed like a no-brainer. Again, I wasn't a big podcaster or podcast listener
Mm,
before, but I was obviously bullish on video. And again, it's like if you're going to sit there and record, you might as well just film it.
yeah,
In my mind, and so, and then maybe jumping ahead here, but I think one of the big value parts of this, is the video. We get people that ask about doing audio only all the time. And we
yeah,
could just kind of tell them it's like, you know what, we're not going to probably be the best pick
mm,
for you because you're going to end up overpaying because, the video component's a good chunk of it. And then on that note, too, about the second it's video, it becomes something maybe other than a podcast. I agree more or less. And I think that actually we're going to, in the next year or two, I think start to see a shift away from like a podcast to just like a show. And we get people in here all the time that don't even care about the long form or to release a podcast. They don't even put it out on Spotify. They just want the video for social media clips. We'll have a
yeah,
group of realtors that come in, talk about real estate market, and then they just chop up the videos and call it a day there. They just, they like would call it a podcast, but I don't think the podcast has a name or they don't like,
mm,
promote it like an actual podcast. It's really just a way to come in, record a conversation,
yeah.
and we
So
make it easy.
what you're seeing is it's shifting, right? So it's shifting from just a traditional audio only podcast to now becoming this multifaceted marketing platform where you can record video content if you're a B2B or service provider. Um, business owner come in there, record content, and then use that as marketing collateral for social media marketing, et cetera. I feel like that's the added benefit, right, of doing something like a video podcast. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, and just we'll talk about just the general kind of use case. So yeah, we deal with a decent amount of what I consider just like retail level people that come in and they'd like
Yeah.
to be podcasters. They want to have a show. They see people killing it and want to do that. And again, we're happy to record with people like that. It's just it's a tough sell. It's a tough thing, and especially because it's like you got to pay a decent amount of money to come in here,
Mhm.
and then if you're paying with us to edit or doing it yourself, like it's a big undertaking for
Yeah.
someone that's making no money and doing this in their part time. The businesses that come in, again, we kind of guide them that it's not so much about building a podcast. It's more about propping up your marketing. It gives you cheap-ish content that's valuable to post out. And for a lot of these guys, just looking like the authority in a space is really important. Again, if you have 50 people that listen to your podcast, to most people, that doesn't sound like a big number, but if you're um, a, a leadership consulting person and you have 50 CEOs that listen to you and are thinking about hiring you and spending tens of thousands of dollars with you, it's different, So businesses come in and they understand that a little bit more, and we obviously help push them in that direction. But yeah, we don't really push them. You guys aren't like really in the interest of, you're not in the business of podcasting. You're just trying to like um, prop up or market yourself with the podcast. So.
But even with the budget, Tom, would you agree that, I mean, is it or disagree, if is it a necessity to have a video even for, let's say, a podcaster who wants to take this serious and take it to the next level and build brand authority? Because let's say this is an era of a personal brand being more visible, right?
Mhm.
To attract clients or to attract more audience, to build a community. I
Yeah.
mean, is it a necessity now in 2024 and moving onward to have some sort of video element to a podcast for a podcast creator?
I wouldn't say it's like a necessity, but to me, it's like, why not? Right. So if you're doing remote sessions and such, you can hop on Zoom. And as we talked about off camera, I mean, it's, not great. I think everyone's a little sick and tired of seeing two faces on screen and not kind of like in person. But it's like, if you guys are going to have
Not
this
our faces.
conversation
Come on, Tom.
anyway,
Not our faces, man. Not our faces. Come on now.
there you
Not
go.
our
But it's like this. You're recording video because it's like, why not? You said you're an audio guy. The audio numbers do better. It's like we could not. We could shut these cameras off and we could just have it be audio. But it's like, if it's happening, you might as well film it. And then I think for most people, again, if you're not chopping it up, if you're not really utilizing the video component the way that you should be, then it's like, yeah, maybe feels not important. But
right.
to your thing about, like the costs associated, like I think again, if you're doing it remotely via Zoom, it's like you can record via Zoom, or if you want to spend a couple of bucks a month on Riverside or StreamYard or something like that, like there you go, bang, you got a webcam. You most likely have an iPhone, and if you just have a good mic and some okay lighting, you don't have to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. You can get a pretty good video that will be suitable for other social media consumption with pretty minimal equipment. So you definitely don't need to come to us or spend a whole bunch of money to get into video. But to me, it's like, why would you not if you with how easy it is to be in it now?
Yeah. Well, to add on to that, Tom, let me ask you this. The follow
Sure.
up is, for our listeners and watchers who are trying to get on the technical side, because one of the things that I find with clients is like, I want to have video, as you mentioned, but it's pretty pricey. I don't have the budget. But what
Hmm.
about for our budget, friendly, conscious creators out there? I mean, what are
Hmm.
the essential pieces of equipment and software that you recommend to just kind of get a video podcast going? What would you recommend specifically?
So I think um, if you're doing anything remotely, you need some service to facilitate that remote recording. And I think Zoom is one that people gravitate to initially, but in my experience, Zoom is not as versatile from a creator standpoint as I think it's great for what it's used for, just like business conferencing and talking, but it's not as great for the recording element. So we're familiar with StreamYard. We're obviously more partnered, I guess, with Riverside at this point. And so we're big fans of either of those services. And what those allow you to do is record um, more isolated, separate things. I assume StreamYard is going to allow you to take just my video, just your video. I mean, we're in a
Mhm.
cool, backdrop that you can, I assume, make. And I've seen from a live standpoint, if you're doing anything live, StreamYard has, I think, better services. I don't think Riverside promotes anything live, but one of those services to facilitate if you're in person with the person. I think audio is still very important. I think I would rather you spend money on some nice microphones and having
Mhm,
a good enough audio setup before you spend money on a camera, because I think your iPhone, if you have a newish iPhone, could do pretty well, opposed to like, to get into a DSLR camera is still a sizable investment. And even if you spend the equivalent, like $1,000, let's say, a iPhone, standard iPhone price, you're not killing it with the camera either. Like $1,000 for a camera in the lens is not a whole lot of money either. So I would say use, cell phone if you can. I think one angle, if you are strategic with how you use it, you can get two people in an angle or more if you're sitting at a desk or something, maybe. But I think you can record one. I don't know how the best way to record from your cell phone. Storage would be probably an issue at that point too. But I know a couple of bigger studios that still actually use iPhones as their like primary camera device for
mm,
various reasons. So can definitely get done. And then lighting, I think, is obviously important too. We hopefully I look okay here, but lighting is important. But you can get natural lighting. You can shoot at the house, or if you have home lights, you don't need to go out and get all the professional stuff. But like with everything, if you have a little bit of money to spend, it's going to go a good ways.
so audio, good lighting, and then environment, having an
Just
environment that's
just
aesthetically
learning
pleasing.
what you can from the internet. I watch a
Mhm,
video on lighting, learn
mhm,
about setting up a nice frame. Again, like I think I could do more damage with an iPhone than somebody could do with one of my really nice cameras, just because
mhm,
I know how to work with stuff. And not that you need to like be a lighting expert or look into gaffing, but it's like, just, yeah, put a little bit of effort in and you could get a nice setup with minimal stuff in my mind. And yeah, I think audio would be the first thing, especially if you're just going to record audio too. I mean, a Rodecaster I think is the only
mhm,
real competitor in the space. I'm sure you're recording with a Rodecaster, or at least I'm being patched through one, and I am with you. So that's a cheap enough piece of gear, and they've come out with
uh,
a couple of smaller, like two microphone options that are even more affordable. So for couple $100, let's say $1,000,
yeah,
you could put together, and
very
using your iPhone, you could come up with a setup and be good.
very cost effective. Gone are the
Yeah.
days of the mix minus days. Remember those, Tom? Mix minus, we had to get the
It can get complicated,
that
and
started. Oh, man.
yeah, and
All the
that's one of
cables and
the and that's the other thing too is, I think a value prop for us is that we handle all that sort of stuff. Again, people, you come in, they're more budget conscious. They're like, I'm thinking about, buying this stuff myself. It's like, cool, great. We support you doing that. We actually like, 100% support you doing that, because yeah, you're going to spend the money with us, and like might as well spend it on yourself and save money or whatever. But um, it still requires some sort of technical, I would say expertise, but you got to kind of know what you're doing to some degree. Again, that goes back to just about everything. If you don't speak this sort of stuff, XLR cables and mic cables and all that sort of fun stuff will feel a little overwhelming for most people.
let me ask you this, man. You produced a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
We're talking, you worked with, some celebrities and
Yeah.
other, thought leaders in different industries. They say, content is king, and I do believe like when you have a interview-based podcast, I believe that conversation is queen. Like you have to have good conversation, good engaging content
Yeah.
to really build that audience. What have you seen and what, with the podcasts that you produce that are really successful? What are some kind of key strategies you can share with us to create more engaging video podcast
Sure.
content that could stand out?
I think it's an unfortunate reality, but again, of some of those celebrities that have come in here, those videos get the most plays, but it's not necessarily just because the content was the most interesting.
Mhm,
It's they have other followings and such. So we've had some of the most interesting conversations that probably didn't go too popular. So I don't think that viewership and numbers is, I guess, the best gauge for
mhm,
success. But when it comes to interviews and how to run a good interview, I think that is a skill. I think a lot of people come here on their first episode, and by the time they sit in the chair and have the lights on them, they're a little like freaked out. And I think
mhm,
for more amateur hosts, it's common to not do a whole lot of research on your guest, and which is understandable, because you're like, we're just talking, which is true. But I think the better interviews are ones where either the guest is super interesting, they got a bunch of good stories to tell. Like I think that works out pretty well if you just have to kind of guide them somewhere and then let them talk. That's great. But I think the interviews that feel more special and you can tell that they're a little bit more engaging from all elements, is when there's a little bit more thought and effort put in. Again, we see people all the time that just come in and, so tell us a little bit about yourself. And from a guest perspective, it's like, okay, I guess,
That question, by the way, that question, I always talk about that question. People know that. It's like, tell us about it. It's like, well, how far do you wanna go back? I feel that question
yeah,
always puts people in an awkward situation, Tom. So
yeah.
it's just
Well, it's not even so much like to me, it's not as awkward as much as just like it feels low effort. And again, like
yeah, yeah,
if it's your
yeah,
friend and stuff, like we get tons of people in here that that's its whole other speech if you should be interviewing your friends and such. But we always try to get people to strive for people that are outside of their circle and have usually more of a sphere of influence, you know. So
yeah,
invite someone on your show that has a following and can help promote the show too. But yeah, then we get it's usually younger people too that don't really get it as much. But we've had a
yeah.
couple of guys come in and interview people, and it's like yeah, and then they do like the rapid fire questions, like, "What's your favorite color?" And it's like, bro, you're wasting this person's time. Like, this is an NFL player you got here. Like, don't waste his time with this sort of stuff. But anything takes practice. Again, I'm not. We've seen a whole lot, so I'd like to
Yeah.
think that I could probably run an interview pretty well. And from the video production company, we still do that, and I have to usually run the interviews for people.
Mhm.
So I'd like to think I'm pretty decent about it, but it is a skill, and similar to
Yeah.
all the other stuff, I was like do a little bit of research, watch a couple of podcasts, but um, find interesting people too. Again, and I also don't
Mhm.
like just because your video didn't blow up doesn't mean that it wasn't good. I guess.
Mhm. Any other common pitfalls that you see, mistakes that you see a lot of, like, new creators getting into the video podcasting space,
I
that we
think it's
should
one. Yeah, I think it's a problem that I saw, and it's common amongst like anyone trying to do something. Basically, the fun part is the recording. Getting the interview, getting the guest being here is fun. Uh, the editing, the promotion,
yeah.
the networking behind the scenes, the building out like the your podcast page, trying to get better guests, trying to do all that sort of stuff is usually where people start to fall apart a little bit more. And we see it all the time where it's like we record stuff with people and then we're like, did they post it? And we go look and it's like, no, or they like posted just a clip from it and not the full thing. It's like, what are you doing? And then I remember vividly from the recording studio days that people would come in, they'd record their song, they'd all be stoked about it. It was great. So the hottest song they've ever done. And then they'd post it on, Facebook, and that would be it. Just Facebook like one time. And and then 2 weeks later they'd be like, oh, nobody was out there supporting. And it's like, the marketing, the behind the scenes is so crucial. And so many
Yeah.
people just don't end up doing it because it is the less fun stuff.
Monetization is a hot topic for a lot of content creators, man. It's always a tricky subject, especially for podcasters. That's something I'm constantly just feel like it's a tug of war with. Like, I want to start a podcast, but I want to monetize this. I'm curious to know your thoughts, man, on like for any advice for any video podcasters who are kind of getting
Yeah.
into this space. Are there any like unique opportunities in the video podcasting in comparison to audio only?
Yeah. I mean, so I wouldn't say it's too much different. I think that
Mm,
the advice I'd give towards monetization would be the same for if it was audio only, I guess. I think video helps a little bit to sell it because, again, let's say I'm promoting Blender Bottle here. Um, Being like, "Come get this blender bottle, it's the best," is, I think, gonna be better for them than, "Come get this blender bottle, it's the best," like, it's something you can't see, so, I think it helps out from that perspective, but the advice that we usually give people is, again, unless you have a pre-existing community and a large following, any sort of money from the stream or any sort of stuff like that is nil and so far out of the realm of, like, possible money for you, so
right.
sponsorships are the number one thing, and I think similarly, sponsorships to get sponsors to come to you is typically you have to do pretty big numbers. So if you're not doing big numbers, it's tough. But what we see people have success in, and usually what we like push people to do is reach out to companies themselves and try to find more strategic partnerships. So we have a podcast that comes in here, and the host is epileptic
Mm,
and she interviews other people with that condition. And she has a couple of sponsors. Again, I'm sure her show is, successful, but not It's not like viral content, it's if you don't have epilepsy, it's probably, not something of interest. But she has a couple of, I don't know if it's drug companies or companies that make medication or something for it, but like those are the sponsors of the show. That makes sense.
Makes
And
sense.
they're
Yeah.
probably willing to see fewer numbers, but are either happy to support, which is my guess, which I think is okay. And again, not that a charity and not that a podcast needs to be a charity, but like try to reach out to people that it makes sense. I don't want to say like friends and family, but like if a local business or somebody that and like what your podcast is about and what they do is like close enough, reach out. They might be willing to give you a shot, whether it drives a whole lot of traffic for them or not. They either just want to support or maybe it makes sense. But again, for her, it's like a good example of like, if you're niche down specifically, like there's only a couple of
Mm,
sponsors that make sense. And if you
mhm.
target them, they understand that. Again, like 10,000, if we're a podcast goes out to the same 10,000 people, I'd rather, and I was selling drugs for epilepsy, I would rather go to a podcast that's about epilepsy than
That's right.
let's just say the Love is Blind girls. Like it just doesn't make sense. So just because you have low numbers doesn't mean it's impossible to get sponsors. But at some point, you should have some numbers. So that goes back to promoting it. You got to spend time doing that, and then maybe just reach out to them on your behalf. Don't wait for them to come to you.
Yeah.
Would be my suggestion on that. But
I
the majority of people that come here are not monetizing their. We got people with sponsors, but not like, I don't know if anyone's like full time podcaster.
Yeah, I mean, takes time, right? It takes a lot of time to build a podcast brand, and I like to use the acronym BAM. It's BAM. So you have to build a brand, you attract an audience, and then you monetize. And I believe if you do it in that order, very much like a business, you know that, Tom, right? So you have to build a brand, you have to attract an audience, and then you can find ways to sell products or services. And with podcasting, I feel like the rules still apply. I think a lot of people get into it to monetize. I'm like, oh, pick something else because I don't think
Oh
you're going to
yeah,
be making a ton of money out of this.
yeah,
But to your point, you said something that's super powerful, man. In that, you know, there's always this kind of tug of war with my coaching clients in niching. Like, I really don't want to niche. I want to have a podcast to inspire all entrepreneurs. Or I'm like, that could have
yeah,
probably worked in maybe 2009, but you
yeah.
just can't do that now. So the power of niching down, and they say the riches is in the niches, and I truly believe now more than ever to have a successful podcast, the ones that are really crushing it are the ones that are very specialized, they're very targeted. They may not have even a big audience, but they're so
Mhm.
targeted that they can go to a sponsor within the industry and really lock in some sponsorship. So I'm glad you mentioned that, man, for our viewers and watchers, because I think it's still important to go even niche now in 2024, moving forward. You
Yeah,
know?
and again, I think our general advice is like, don't try to give I mean, this is probably not good for your show, but like, don't give we give the advice not to like pursue podcasting if you're trying to make a buck. But I think it, obviously can yield results if done correctly. And if you don't want to niche down, like, cool, but just know that you're going about it in different ways. Like I have an interest in watches. We always make a joke that we don't have any
Mm.
show that we record here ourselves. Like I've been doing this 2 years. I don't have my own show. And just as of late, I was like, I'd like to do a show
That
on
could be a thing. Yeah.
watches. And I was
Yeah.
going to tie it to like entrepreneurship. Even that, I don't really care about anymore. I'm just like, I'm going to talk
Yeah.
about watches. If people want to, if
Yeah.
people want to watch, great. If they don't, cool.
Yeah.
Like I don't,
Right.
I'm not caring to make this a go. And obviously I have the studio, so it makes sense. But,
Yeah.
um,
I love that idea, by
uh,
the way.
an example of like,
Stretch it out for
do
us.
do what makes you happy. Like if you don't need this podcast to make money and you're going in at just like, it'd be cool if
Yes.
the money came, but like, I just want to have a good time with it. Then like, do it for that.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that because that's advice that I always share with people that are looking to start a podcast. And that just you got to be passionate about the subject. Either you're passionate or you're proficient at something. But I mean, I find that the most passionate podcast hosts that go into it simply because they love talking about this specific sport or watches or
Yeah,
something really odd. That those are the ones that are in it for the long haul. They have no monetizing goals. They're just like, I have no expectations. I just simply want to press record, get on front of a camera, and just,
yeah, have
talk
a good
shop.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
have a good time. I think that fun factor is the thing that that a lot
Well,
of
and
creators should embrace more.
yeah, and again, I guess I just want to make the point too that like I don't think that that's like the foolish way to go about it either. Again, like I don't anyone that like I don't know if I'd get into podcasting to make money. Just
Mhm.
full stop. basically. Not that you can't make money, but like do it for you first. Like if you niche down into something that you're like, oh, like, I don't really care too much. Like chances are you're not going to keep up with it. You're not going to be as interested. It's going to show that you don't care as much, and it'll not do as well. So like, do a show for you first. And I think there's ways to obviously monetize should it get to that point.
You alluded to this earlier, of some of the benefits of starting a video podcast post, release. Let's talk about marketing, brother. Like, what are
Yeah.
you seeing from some of your clients, or even just watching, observing other video podcasters
hmm
effectively market their podcast? Are there any examples you can show us, or things that we can do to really use video podcasting to market our shows?
Yeah, I mean, so we don't handle a lot of the publications, so we don't have tons of like the back end analytics of what other people are kind of doing. But I think what we always say, and yeah, I alluded to earlier, is like I think the clips, the short form clip side of it is the primary reason to do video. Again, I think a lot of people like to listen to a podcast as they work out or maybe while they're driving, where it's not as easy to watch. And so, you know, I think that the clips of it basically is the best marketing tool. And again, that just from um, a media standpoint with
Yeah.
Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts, like those have the most organic eyes on them these days.
Mhm.
And I don't think there's anything like nobody's posting audio clips where they just show like the waveforms anymore.
The audiograms,
So
yeah.
again, like it doesn't need to be great quality. Like I see clips that do well that are just caught the right moment and didn't have a crazy setup, but at least there's a video and it's like,
Yeah.
you can hear it. And so I think the guys that are making waves or the best marketing use though is I think um pushing the short form stuff. Ideally,
Yeah.
people come listen to the long thing, but it'll at least get them interested. And I think for most people too, it's like, oh, if I discovered a new podcast, I would be much happier watching 2 or 3 clips of them first to be like, "Oh, these hosts seem fun. I like them. I like what they're talking about. I like the overall vibe that's happening on these clips. Let me go check it out," opposed to, like, just them scrolling to, like, "Let me find a new podcast for the day."
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's the, it's the initial layer of the funnel to me. So
We're seeing a wave of studio podcast operators emerge, brother. And it's safe to say that you are kind of spearheading, from what I've seen,
trying.
yeah, you're doing it. That movement from that video, and then seeing all the engagement and the questions, and of course me reaching out to you, and
Sure,
you
yeah.
were my mentor in that process, and I was like, this is interesting. And now we're seeing again a lot of people pop up. I've been following your feed, and it's like, oh, all these podcast producers
It's a
kind of
lot now, yeah.
emerge. It's crazy, right? Where do you see it going, man? Do you see like this is going to be like a new media business model, and an opportunity for maybe, let's say, a podcast creator to say, hey, let me serve my community by putting
Mhm.
together, of course, it takes a budget, but but still, maybe, serve my community, putting together a studio to
Yeah.
have this as a service offer. What are your thoughts on that, man? And where's it going?
Yeah, well, and so yeah, we've had a lot of people reach out, and it's been interesting. All over the U.S., really all over the world. We've had a lot of
Yeah.
other studios, and I think I'm obviously excited and feel like there still is lots of potential in video podcasting. But I think one of the things we're kind of pushing a little bit more this year, and I think it's a trend that we'll see across the industry, is that people are maybe straying away from calling it a podcast and it being this set like structure, like an hour long sit down chat type deal.
Mhm.
And people that are more interested in just again producing like shows, which we can do. And then I think over time too, people are going to be looking for other forms of content. And so we're starting to roll out some offerings for just what we call general studio content, which I think has more long term legs, I guess. But I think it'll be a good supportive element. Like, obviously, if you know how to do what we do here at the video podcast, like, and I have the background in the video stuff, like we can make any sort of content. And what once used to cost we'll just say an arm and a leg to have us come out to your office and film stuff, it's like now just do it in studio is a lot easier. And it's at a price point that's more obtainable by the everyday person. Like, to normal people to come out, "Oh, I want to film my podcast at my house." It's like, prepare yourself. But for businesses, it's whatever. But here it's like we can get content pretty cheap, you know? And so I think as personal branding continues to be
Mhm.
really important, I don't see producing content becoming less cool anytime soon.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
fact, I think it'll just even get more of a demand to do it. I think that we're still seeing a trend towards, yeah, personal branding and just like having content of yourself and
yeah.
promoting yourself that way. So I think we're going to kind of try to cater our offering to help provide options for people in that sphere basically. I think a lot of guys come in here to podcast initially and then they see some of the other stuff that we can do, and especially the businesses, they're like, oh cool, let's do some of this stuff, let's do some educational content. We have guys that come in and just do internal facing stuff for some bigger organizations, and they don't release a podcast at all, they just want a conversation recorded. And so yeah, I think we're starting to see a little bit of a shift, and I think maybe it's just something that I personally want to do, but moving not away from podcast studio, but more just into content studio.
Do you see other like what are some like the like what's been the biggest surprise of like some industry or a leader kind of getting into the space to record a podcast? Are you seeing like anything that's kind of coming our way that's kind of like underserved or something that you saw? I was like, wait a minute, that's how. Do you want to start a podcast? Have you had any of those?
Yeah, I think maybe this will answer your question, but I think that there is an opportunity for studio owners in this space because it is a location based thing. So it's a service that has to be done in the local area. But I
Mm.
think what a lot of people want to do is they from the internet and just realize that like I need content and they don't know how to do it. And so I
Yeah.
think the more accessible you can make it for people, the busier you'll probably be. And there's a guy that I did an interview on my show with that is in Midland, Texas, which is like a small town, but
Mhm.
he has done well enough for himself. And it's like I think a lot of people assume just because we're in Chicago or LA, New York, or these big cities that it's like you have to be there to make it work. And I think that is obviously it helps out. There's more people here, but I think that you could probably make a go at this, or again, just let's just call it a content studio, in plenty of places. Obviously,
Mm.
the demographics, price point of things might shift, but
Right.
again, we're seeing people all over the world, frankly, at this point, that are interested in starting up a studio. And again, they might not be able to invest the same amount that we did into this space, and they might have clients that are willing to pay the same equivalent value, but equivalent maybe in their own dollars, that it makes sense for them. And I think that regardless of where you are in the world, people are interested. They're searching for this sort of stuff. So there's definitely um, opportunity for people that are interested in getting into this space, I would say.
As we land the plane, brother, if there's my last question is if there's one creator factor that every content creator should learn or master,
Yeah.
what would that be?
And I was hoping I'd have a better answer, but I think, what the first thing I landed on, and I'll go with that, is I think being original is really important. As we're talking about this, it's interviewing to get tips, it's to learn about stuff. I think when you get into anything, you pull inspiration from others, and I think that that's obviously crucial and at a good point. None of us would have personality or taste if it wasn't for those before us and who we looked up to form those things. Um, but at the same time, I think completely just following trends or doing something because this other podcast is really popular and they do this. I think that is sometimes toxic, and I don't think that. Um, I think what makes the successful creators successful is that they are unique, and again, it's like in the YouTube world or in just about in any world, it's like sometimes there's people that Joe Rogan like again, Joe, you can't mention Joe Rogan's name without thinking of a podcast. And that's that sort of gravitas that you kind of want to have. Obviously, not attainable by everybody there, but yeah, I think being original and just being unique to yourself is important, as cliche as it sounds.
I love that. I love that, my man. Chicago podcast dot studio. I just want to make sure I
There
get
you
that
go.
right.
Yes.
I want to make sure I get that right. Chicago podcast. I was
It's
thinking I was going to
cheaper
say
than
Chicago
dot
podcast studio.
com, you know?
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, right. But yeah, Chicago podcast dot studio
Yes,
and
sir.
Inova Digital YouTube channel is where you can find Tom's amazing work. It's on social media as well. Inova Digital is a great place for a lot of great content on there, guys. So make sure you go check it out. And there's going to be a rebrand there, but make sure you go there, subscribe, and then follow Tom's journey onto the next channel, right, Tom?
Right. Yep. And I think we've kind of landed on a name, and it's a little general, but it's just going to be called the Studio Business. And so the channel will get rebranded here pretty soon. So go check out the Studio Business, guys.
Simplicity is king, brother. Chicago podcast studio,
Straight to the point.
studio business, straight to the point.
It
SEO
makes
friendly, y'all.
sense.
Makes
Yeah.
sense. Clear and concise. Let's go,
But thank you for
brother.
having me. I really appreciate you making time. And yeah,
Absolutely,
I'm
man.
excited to see what you do with the show. And I enjoyed our talk.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man. Peace.